I had a brother who had special needs, and he had physical and developmental needs, was nonverbal, incontinent care. He needed care for everything, and then also had a G tube.
Older or younger than you?
1.5 years older than me. So I was the little big sister. And I can remember, and he wasn't born with a disability. Something happened when he was 3 years old, and he lived at Bloorview for a year, and then my mom decided, well, he's going to live at home with us, just because that's who my mom is. And, I don't remember this drastic change of, oh, my brother's able-bodied, now he's disabled.
You were so young.
I was so young. I remember certain aspects of Bloorview, which is really weird. My mom still wonders how I remember them, but so I pretty much grew up with a brother who had a disability, and right when my brother actually got sick and lived in Bloorview, my mom left my dad. So it was definitely one of those life changers that we talk about, where something goes from this one day and changes completely the next day. And from what she tells me, it was kind of a blessing in disguise. She knew she needed to do something and didn't know what, and this provided an opportunity for her to pack her stuff up and leave. So we lived with my uncle for a long time, and living with my brother was pretty awesome. He was a pretty awesome guy. I didn't feel like anything really changed. He still pushed me over and crawled all over me and jumped on me, and we'd wrestle on the ground and things like that. And I do different things with him just like any other sibling, and from a young age, I remember things like, bringing my mom a diaper or helping set up a G-tube feed, or, things that not all kids do. But when I asked my mom about it, she says she never forced me. She said I wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. So, growing up with him was a lot of fun. We did a lot of ridiculous things when she wasn't looking. I remember one time I fed him a piece of cheese, and he was G-tube fed. So, you're not supposed to be people who are most people who are G-tube fed don't get fed by mouth because they have reflex problems. And, a couple hours later, she calls me into the room. She goes, "Marjorie, did you put something in your brother's mouth?" And I said, "No." She says, "Are you sure?" And I said, "No." And she says, "Because I found a piece of cheese in his mouth." And I said, "Oh, I thought he would have ate it by now." So she totally caught me. I must have been 6 or 7 or something like that. We did fun piggyback rides around the house, and once he got his Hoyer lift, we played around in that, and I swung him around and all things like that. And eventually he got a hard helmet, right, to protect him, and I remember getting bashed in the face with that thing. It hurt so much. But we had a good time, and my mom, we are a Christian family, and I remember it wasn't like you have to go to church and you have to do this and but I remember that God was just a part of our living, and Jesus was just a part of our lives, and we lived with him, and and if bad things happened, my mom, explained it to me from a very generic, and, we live in the world and sometimes bad things happen. Let's figure out how to deal with it. And I don't remember ever being this, snidey teenager either. And I ask her and she says, no, she says, you had your rough days, but for the most part, you pulled through. And that's my mom. She's a very positive person. She, works very hard. She doesn't worry about what other people think. Caribbean background, right? She just like, la, 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 la.
So there was acceptance.
There was total acceptance. We didn't have a lot of family, but my uncle was always there.
And how was he with your brother?
He was great. He was so great and so welcoming and warm. And, my uncle now was an eccentric man, and he, the same way, just openly accepting and happy and vibrant. And, he had lost his wife, so my cousins lived with us, and, it was just a fun big house. And I remember carrying that wheelchair up those steps because we lived on the top floor. So, I'd take the foot panels and my mom would take the chair and all this fun stuff. And even when we moved out on our own, it was just we always had a good time. And I made friends on my own, for sure. I had friends in the hall that I'd go and play with. But I'd always come back and check that he was okay, or I'd put him in the door so he could watch us play or something like that. And anybody that wasn't a friend of his wasn't a friend of mine.
Right. So he was just, all of it was just fully integrated. It was
Yeah,
just
we did everything
jumbly
together.
family doing stuff.
Yeah, we had nursing, but we took the nursing. My mom would take me to church, or she'd take me out to see a movie or dinner or something. But we did everything together. There was never a time where, and we go to Jamaica to visit her family, but even if he was in respite and we weren't going to Jamaica, we were at Bloorview every day.
Right.
Because it was like, but he's there, so let's go. So we'd go and we'd hang out, and I remember my mom setting his feet up and stuff, and the nurse was going, what are we here for?
Right. It probably wasn't as common then for parents to be doing care.
Very uncommon. And, we still have friends with some of the nurses that worked at the old Bloorview Children's site at Leslie and Shepherd. And some of them have moved over, and, it's nice to see them because I remember all of them. I remember all their names. I remember all the doctors and social workers that I used to meet. And,
right.
It was always funny because my mom would go, we'd be at Bloorview, and I'd go, I haven't seen Marjorie for a while. And she'd get the front desk to page me. And they'd find me in the basement somewhere with some doctor chatting about something, some neurologist that's busy at work,
right,
chatting with this, little girl because I'm bored and I need to do something. So it was a fun experience. I didn't have an experience like most other children, for sure.
Right. Now, as your brother started getting older and bigger, and you maybe you can comment a little bit on life with him as a teenager, becoming a young adult, maybe concerns or plans your family was making for as he got older. What was...
Yeah, I don't know that we made any plans.
You weren't... So think for the medium term you could...
Yeah, I think there was we recognized that, he's getting bigger, but I helped my mom out a lot. And, we joined a new church, and the church we went to before had stairs, so he could never go, but we joined a new church, and, there was one or two ladies in the church that said, we'll come over and watch him, which was really nice. And, sometimes I stayed and watched him so my mom could do stuff, or I go, Stephen and I are going grocery shopping, and we go and pick stuff up so she could stay home. And I just liked doing that kind of stuff. And I had, like I said, I had my own friends, so they'd come over and, we'd hang out, and they were always good to him. They'd come in and they'd say hi, and we'd do something together, or, I'd go out and, I'd always make sure my mom was okay, and, what do you need before I go? And definitely wasn't typical because I was setting up things like meds and things like that as a teenager. But it was never overbearing, and I never worried about things, about, the future of what was going to happen. As he turned 19, we had a friend come to us who had owned a group home and worked at Bob Rummel Center for the Deaf, and said to my mom, he's turning 20 next year. No, he was 20. Sorry, I was 19. He's getting bigger. What are you going to do? And at that time, my mom was 55, 56 maybe. And we started looking into homes, and we looked into a home that was very close to us, and day programs. And I remember visiting all of them and things like that. And maybe about 6 months later, he was gone. And it was so hard because we were so ready to live the rest of our lives with him. And his death had nothing to do with his disability. There was none of that kind of stuff. So, it changed immediately. And my teenagehood immediately became adulthood. Because when my brother died, because I didn't know how to just go back to school or how to just go out with my friends and have a great time anymore. It was, now I got to pull up my straps and do stuff, because one, he was never able to, and he will never be able to. But now my mom needs to have a child that she can say is going out and doing stuff, right? My mom was going away for the weekend, and I was going to take care of him for that weekend. And then there ended up being room in a vehicle, so I was able to go. And so we... go to the cottage. We were going to a friend's cottage. And so we tried out a new facility. He was too old for Bloorview now, so we tried out a new respite facility for the weekend, and we went on the Friday, and everything was okay, and they got to meet him and came, and so we left for the cottage that night and came back on Sunday. And my mom said, I'm going to go get him. And I said, no, just take the day and take a break, and I'll go with you on Monday morning and we'll go collect him. And I didn't wake up in time, and my mom went on her own, and she finally found the place and things like that. And when she went, she discovered that he wasn't breathing and he wasn't sitting properly, and immediately said, call the ambulance, something's wrong here. And he was pronounced dead when they got there and things like that.
He was in his bed?
He was in his wheelchair. So when she got there and he was sitting in his wheelchair, she realized something wasn't right and he wasn't sitting quite properly. And, my brother, even though he had all his disabilities, his brain had learned how to do things like grab a cup and things like that, because it didn't happen until he was 3 years old. So he had learned all those things. So he moved around and he looked around, and he wasn't doing any of those things. And when she picked his head up, she realized that he was pale and not breathing. And she immediately said, call the ambulance. He's not breathing. And when the EMS got there, they said, he is dead, and he's been dead for a while now. And we found out later, because I'm pushy and I kept insisting on meetings and, talking with these people, that he was fed by mouth, and he did have a G-tube, and everything that was supposed to go through the G-tube went through the mouth, and he aspirated. So it sucked. I don't even know how else to say it, because it's something that could have been prevented, and it came down to reading a chart properly, and so yeah, it sucked, and it still sucks. And I don't always talk about it with families that I meet, but some families are interested, and I warn them, this is not going to be easy to hear. And this also doesn't mean you can never look for respite in a facility. I remind them that, things have changed, and our process was different the way we went through it than others, and that, this is something that happened. It was called a crime scene. And then once the guy that does the autopsy got there, coroner, thank you, and said it was a natural death, it was immediately dropped. And that's when I started pushing because it's funny, because when people die, you don't want to believe it. And I thought I had to think about it, because I said, am I just pushing it because I don't want to believe it, or am I pushing it because something happened? And I thought about it a lot, and I prayed about it, and I talked to my mom about it, and she said, no, I think you're being inquisitive, and I think you have a right to ask. And and she didn't necessarily have the strength to ask. So I was that person, right? And we were the inquiry. And we pushed it and pushed it and pushed it until we got an answer. And then once we got that answer, we went to his neurologist that has known him for years to say, look at this autopsy, tell us what happened. And once he said it, we filed for lawsuit, right?
So negligent care? Negligent
care, yeah. And they settled. They're part of a big organization. They settled right away. Mm-hmm. And not that made anything better, but it changed a few things for us, right? Like we were a low-income family anyways, so it changed a few things for my mom, because I went off and started working on my own anyway, so I wasn't she didn't need to take care of me anymore.
It's also important to hold people to account.
Yeah. And that was a big thing for me. I sometimes felt like there wasn't really a sorry, because there was a sorry because your brother died. There wasn't a sorry we did something wrong. My mom never said, oh no, I have a child with a disability. I never heard her complain. And I'm sure she had her complaints, but that wasn't part of her life before.
Right.
My brother was disabled. So why would it be part of her life now? She never complained, and not only did she complain, but it was just, this is how we're going to live our lives. You know, right? Awful things happened to her too. She, you know, had a husband that wasn't always great to her, and she left him, and then he disowned my brother, and then I don't have a great relationship with him now either because of other things that happened, right? Like, there aren't great things that happen, but
Right.
for the most part, you can choose to say all these things happened to me, and I, you know, the world owes me something. Or you can choose to say, all these things happened to me, and how am I going to work to prove that I deserve these things? And I never learned the other way. He was buried on Remembrance Day on the Saturday, and we were in church the next day, and people going, what are they doing in church? But for us, that was home, right? Like, that was kind of we can't sit at home. We need to be somewhere that's with other people, and, you know, and, you know, she talked to her sister and her brother then, and so she had a good support network, but things definitely changed, and it was hard for a friend actually from church named Diane, who's great, and she came over and helped my mom clean out his bedroom, and, you know, clean out his stuff, and we still have stuff, just because there's stuff that you're like, I don't ever want to throw that away, but, you know, that was a big undertaking to clean out everything and give stuff away and, you know, donate stuff. And, you know, she had a car, Diane had a car, and we didn't. So she drove stuff to wherever we needed to, you know, and yeah, so we had a lot of support. And not necessarily like close family support, but, you know, people who had become family. Yeah, exactly. When I was about 12 or 13, a family friend called us and said, you know, would you be interested in doing some care for my son, who was 8 at the time, and I think I was 11 or 12 even. And I said, sure. And he had physical and developmental needs himself. And I worked for them for every weekend until I was 19. So I grew to love it immediately through being at Bloorview with my brother when he had respite weeks, and, you know, taking care of him. And I remember, you know, taking diapers to my mom at 7 years old, just because that's the type of person I was. And so worked with this young man, and then things changed when I was about 19. My brother passed away. I didn't know what I was going to do, because I was like, I want to really be a teacher, but now I don't know if I can really cope through school, and what am I going to do? And it became very clear after moping around and leaving school 2 months that I needed to get a job. I couldn't just sit around anymore. I needed to get a job, or I needed to go back to school. And I talked to a friend, and she had been in this work for a long time, and she was a swim instructor at Bloorview, and she said, great, I'll hook you up with somebody. And I met a young man who also had significant needs, and fell in love with him and fell in love with the job. And I think I started working a week later, which was really unheard of because he had such significant needs and his mom didn't trust anybody. And started working with him, and, you know, 4 to 5 days a week, and it grew from there. And then I started working with another person and another person and another person, and I went to school to get a developmental service worker diploma, and I was 25, and that's around the same time I started my business, and here I am. So the drive was definitely my brother, but I had a love for it from the time I was a child. It was just evident. There are kids that lived at Bloorview that I still keep in contact with, that I played with when I was kids. Just because, you know, my brother was there and I needed something to do, and I'd play with the other kids, and, you know, they're all living in supported independent living or something like that, but I still keep in contact with them, and, you know, and I still have a connection with Holland Bloorview now, and yeah. And a lot of the families that knew me when I was a kid go, you know, they'll see me every once in a while and go, oh, we knew Marjorie when she was this little, and some of them I'm supporting their kids now. Right. So it's you know, the drive is is definitely my brother, but the drive is the relationships that I've made with a lot of the families and a lot of the young adults and kids. You know, they are part of my family, and I know that sounds funny because it is a working relationship, but they really are. I know all the Bubshes and the Opas and the, you know, Bubbies and Zadies and aunts and uncles, and, you know, I know a lot of the kids. I know their whole family.
Right.
So there's that drive too of keeping that connection open, right? Because some kids grow up and they say, well, I don't need a support worker. The ones that can, I don't need a support worker anymore. And I go, great, let's go to the bar.
Right.
I think there was some point where I would say like, oh yeah, I'd adopt somebody who had a disability. And I don't want that to sound ignorant, to say that having a disability is such a great thing. But I think it is part of my world, and I really do understand it. And I know it's tiring and it's stressful, but there are so many children out there that need to be adopted in general, disability or not. And there's different cultures and sectors that it's harder for children to get adopted, and disability would definitely be one of them. It's always funny when people go, oh, so because you had a brother, that's why
Right.
you're doing this. And I go, no. And they go, oh, like, I don't know how to explain it, because my brother inspires me, but he inspires me in the world. It's not about what I do necessarily. It's about things that happen in the world that make me laugh, or that make me feel good, or, you know, when I'm feeling down, or, you know, that's the inspiration I get from my brother.
Which you may have gotten anyway, whether he had disabilities or not.
Exactly.